So what I'm suggesting is that there's a campus culture which is actually being formed by a high school culture. If you look carefully on the web, you will find social activist sites that branch in many, many different directions that come out of high schools doing a tremendous amount of work in testifying, sharing information, contributing to, running bake sales for, sending around petitions for. There's something happening in this age cohort that's very different than what we've seen so far. And if we're smart and if we're principled, both, we're going to understand, like any intelligent educator would, that we have a responsibility in one way or another to transform the way that we are teaching and learning in order to be able to accord with the way that they are best able to be taught and to translate those teachings into learning. Okay, so you can find this on college campuses in many, many different places. But I also want to talk about a group of campuses that a lot of us don't talk about, and I think we're crazy because we don't. If you're not aware of the fact that the vast majority of small private colleges in the United States are heavily involved with a religious denomination, you don't understand the profile of higher education. You just don't. If you don't know what Cedar Hill Baptist College is, or if you don't know what Hillsdale College is, or Azusa Pacific University is all about, you're missing millions of people. Anybody know what I'm talking about? There's a real hostility in places where I hang out and people that I talk to in taking the whole business of religious imagination really, really seriously. We tend to want to turn it into sociology and explain it away, rather than saying that it has some sort of original and deep creative force in our society, rather than simply being the result of something else. You understand what I'm trying to say? And across the country, these small college campuses are, in ways that are quite like, and in other ways quite different, from the mainline public and private institutions that I've been talking about, places that are full of potential for abolitionism. They just are. They're every bit as self-critical about what they teach their students as anything that we would be, and just as predisposed to wanting to change the world for the better as their counterparts in secular campuses are. They've always placed an enormous premium on critiquing a godless world, and what would be a more godless world than a world of commodification of human bodies. They searchingly examine the morality of their own practices, and they constantly challenge their students to prepare for lifelong services as missionaries at home and across the globe. We get a sense of how internationalized our own campuses and student bodies have become. Same thing in these places. Like their secular counterparts, these students number among the millennial generation and are as deeply connected to the wider world electronically as anybody else is. And if you look carefully and begin to sort through the NGOs and various organizations that are already in the field working against slavery in sites around the world, you will find these people every place. It's just the facts. But of greatest significance to any new abolitionist movement in these so-called fundamentalist colleges is the fact that they are nurturing a new development, which I think is really important, which is referred to as New Testament evangelicalism. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Think about how far away you are from this culture, if you are, and how interesting it might be or valuable to learn more about it. Do you know what the emergent church is? Okay. Some people are nodding their heads yes, and I'm glad to see that. This development reflects important new trends in evangelical Protestantism that add fervent concerns about the environment, poverty, and social justice to more traditional issues such as abortion and gay marriage. A 2008 Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life survey found that 51% of evangelicals between the ages of 18 and 29, just ahead of the age group that I'm talking about, now characterize themselves politically as independents and not Republicans. The same group identifies strongly with new conservative leaders such as Richard Cizik, who used to be the head of the Southern Baptist Convention, who's now taken a whole variety of positions very much at odds with the old traditional Pat Robertson way of defining these issues, got himself kicked out of his position as a consequence of taking positions on global warming, human trafficking, all kinds of different things. And particularly a much-discussed gentleman named Rick Warren, who showed up in Barack Obama's inauguration, whose message stresses a purpose-driven life. Anybody know about this guy? If you don't know about this guy, please learn about him, because he sold more books than any other human being in the United States in the past decade. More than any other human being in the past decade. A Purpose-Driven Life is the title of the book, whose message stresses committed Christian witnessing as strenuous social service on behalf of the oppressed. What's that all about? Equally crucial, these colleges embrace a theology with implication of implicit hostility to slavery today. To evangelical Christians, modern slaveholders can easily be condemned precisely as so many of the antebellum abolitionists once condemned them, as satanic rebels against God's authority who attempt to supplant his judgment, just dominion, and rule over God's human creations. Okay. I'm suggesting that there's a cultural shift that's very big and very important that we all have to deal with, whether we really are involved with slavery or not. Can you still hear me if I step away from the microphone? I'm changing personas. Okay, what lies behind all this? Why is it this way? How many people get a sense that we are involved in some monster demographic shift in our basic population? We are. I gave a lecture sort of like this at the University of North Dakota about 3 weeks ago. No, about a month ago. And if you think about North Dakota, boy, do you think white. Who showed up? People from the Middle East, people from North Africa, people from Latin America, people from all over the place. That audience is much more diverse than this audience is. You know why? Right next to Grand Forks is one monster Air Force base. And people on that Air Force base were interested in the problem of slavery and wanted to come and hear me talk. And it was amazing to suddenly get a sense that people in the audience were reflecting what you can find on college campuses all over the country. You can't figure out what black and white and red and yellow and all that mean anymore. The sorting mechanisms about race that we've used for decades and decades and decades and decades are being challenged and overcome by all kinds of different people. And the what is Barack Obama discussion is only a small sample of something that's much bigger and much more complicated that is going in the ears of 15-year-olds who are sitting in public school classrooms with people sitting next to them who may come from 11 different language groups and 7 different parts of the world. You look at the struggle with the census, not with trying to identify and sort people, which has always been hard, but with the willingness of people to sort and identify themselves, which has also been hard, but it's much more complicated now than it was before. What I'm suggesting is that underneath this trend towards a much greater sense of spiritual and social engagement in the world by people much younger than us, who don't have the luxury of cynicism. At age 70, or close to it, I've got plenty of friends who are perfectly willing to give a knowing wink to everything that's going on in the world, say, yes, so what? People of this quite younger age group don't have that choice to make, and they know that they don't. And their sense of how they slice and dice the world is not only complicated by the fact that they want to somehow translate what they learn into what they can do to somehow transform the circumstances of their own and other people's lives, but also by their definition of lived experience of what race means. It's all different. Okay? So I'm trying to see if I can get us out of here at the right time. I usually can take a lot longer time to get this done, but I'm working hard. I have to consult where I am. Where am I? Okay.